Hello, and welcome to the Wild Knights podcast.
Hosted by a Knights fan.
And a Wild fan.
And covering all the news, notes, and other wonderful things around Vegas and Minnesota hockey. And when we have nothing left to talk about there, we cover things all around the NHL, PWHL, and all things weird, wacky, and wonderful in the hockey world. So, with that lead off, where would you like to start? Because, I know this is our first episode, and there's only 105 years of hockey history to cover. So where do we want to drop the pin on our first conversation here?
Well, I think we start with the off-season this year, Ian.
Which off-season? Because there are, I'm looking at our handy-dandy script here. We got 3 off-seasons we want to talk about. We could talk about the Vegas off-season, the Minnesota off-season, or the PWHL Minnesota off-season, which that's a time.
Well, let's start with Vegas.
Oh, goody. Thank you. Thank you for that, because this is...
You're welcome.
You know this firsthand. You were literally sitting in my apartment on July 1st, watching me have a complete and unadulterated mental breakdown at the things that were happening at around 10 a.m. Central Time.
I think a mental breakdown is actually probably putting it mildly.
You could have scored some points with me there. Thanks for that. But
that's not my job here.
Fair enough. But for those who didn't know, and for those who were, under a rock for the better part of the last few months.
Or just don't follow the off-season.
Good point. The Golden Knights had 7 unrestricted free agents going into the first day of free agency on July 1st. And when the sun set on July 1st, how many of those players remained with the team?
I think it was 0.
It was 0. And these aren't exactly minor players either. These are, fan favorites. Will Carrier, original Knight, Michael Amadio, who is one of my favorite players on the Stanley Cup roster, Chandler Stevenson, who is getting massively overpaid in Seattle now, and, of course, the 2023 Conn Smythe winner in Jonathan Marchessault, who joined his old friend Steven Stamkos in Nashville. But, I don't really want to, linger on the people that aren't around anymore.
Well, you also forgot to mention that Logan Thompson also
No. That happened before July 1st. I had already made my peace with it. That happened at the draft.
Yeah, but it still hurts you. Let's be real here.
We're not going to talk about that yet. I have proceed to the script. I have a bullet here that will tell you when we're going to talk about Logan Thompson, because I don't want to start yelling yet. This podcast is less than 5 minutes old, and I'd rather not blow out people's eardrums yet.
Okay, that's fair.
So, to keep myself guided, I asked the question, why was it so bad? Why did the Knights have such a bad July 1st and such a bad free agency class altogether? And it comes down to something that is well known in every single sport. Whether you follow hockey, whether you follow, probably not baseball because they have a different cap system. If you follow football, and if you follow like basketball or something. There's this thing. It's called the championship tax. It's paid by all the teams when they win their first championship. They spend right up to the limit. And in the case of the Golden Knights this year, maybe a little over the limit. Mark Stone, I'm looking at you. But anyway.
I don't think we really want to go into cap circumvention conversation.
No.
Maybe we save that till next podcast.
Anyway. But what happened to the Knights is they didn't have to pay it after they won the Cup in 2023 because, for lack of a better phrase, all the players that were performing well still had 1 year left on their deal. Marchessault way outperformed his contract in the playoffs. Chandler Stevenson way outperformed his contract. Reminded that we acquired him from Washington via a 4th round pick. So he way outperformed his value. Will Carrier outperformed his value, but they all had 1 more year on their contracts. So fast forward to the end of the 23-24 season, and those contracts are over, and a player that to the Knights was only worth, I think it was like $1.2 million in the case of Will Carrier, is now worth $2 million. Or Chandler Stevenson, who is making less than $5 million, now making more than $7 million in Seattle. So that's kind of why it was so bad, because a lot of players were they just performed better than we were paying them as a team. And it makes sense, players that, I'm not mad at these players for securing the bag and making money that'll set them up for their lives.
No, because that's part of what they do.
And
that's part of their job.
And they gave me the memory. They won the championship. I'd be so much more upset if they had lost to the Florida Panthers in 2023.
I do have a question for you, though.
Hit me.
Do you think that some of these players have hit their peak?
Oh, yeah.
Like last season?
Oh, yeah.
Or this past season? And they're capitalizing on that with deals that are almost overpaying them for what they're worth currently.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there are two players that really come to mind when we talk about outperforming their deals. And I mean, it really starts with Jonathan Marchessault. I mean, he scored 42 goals last year. He came one shy of tying the franchise record of 43 goals, which was set by William Karlsson in the 2017-18 season. And much to, the real Knights fan in me knows that trying to break that record is why the Knights had to play the Dallas Stars in the first round, because game 82 against the Ducks, which the Knights lost, by the way, they spent that whole night trying to get Marchessault to tie the record, and they wound up losing the game. But that's just a conspiracy theory for another day. But he's never going to score 42 goals again. And he's got a 5-year, $5.5 million deal in Nashville. And sure, he's probably worth $5.5 million, but I don't think he's ever going to be that offensive force again. Maybe he is, and I hope for the best as long as he's beating up on the Minnesota Wild or the Dallas Stars and not us. And I can see, I look across the room, there's an eyebrow raised and a death glare pointed in my direction.
You know what? I will admit that Minnesota has some issues right now, and we do need to fix that, but I think that don't beat up on us too much, man. This is our first episode.
I'll be patient with you guys. And it's even more obvious with like Chandler Stevenson, who's making just an obscene amount of money in Seattle. Like, yeah, Seattle needs a shooter and a good player, but what I remember from the last 27 games of Chandler Stevenson's tenure with the Knights, he didn't do a whole lot, which, I mean, it may have been due to exterior factors, which I'll get to in a second. But I don't think he's ever going to live up to his contract either. I mean, The Athletic and various people on hockey Twitter who know more about free agency rankings than I do have listed it as one of the 3 worst contracts signed on July 1st. Just because it is a lot of money to play for a player who was always a supplemental piece on a line with Mark Stone and Brett Howden during the playoffs, or with Brendan Brisson or Jack Eichel on certain occasions throughout the 23-24 season. And I'm going to say this next little bit because there's been this conversation about that this offseason may be, the beginning of the end of the Knights' competitive window, because they subtracted a lot and didn't really add anything aside from a couple of filler pieces in a number 3 goalie or number 4 goalie in Akira Schmid and a potential roster player in Alexander Holtz coming over from New Jersey. But the way that I choose to look at this offseason was really the bill coming due for stuff that happened at the trade deadline. And if you add 2 people into the equation, the offseason makes a lot more sense. If I'd have told you on July 1st, the Knights went out and signed a certifiable top pairing defenseman in Noah Hanifin, who's really, really good and was really good for the Knights down the stretch and in the playoffs, and
not good enough, apparently.
I knew you were going to say that. But he's still pretty good, and it only cost a couple of picks and a couple of prospects who were never going to pan out in the system, including my favorite Knights prospect, Daniil Miramanov, who's now in Calgary, who came over in the Hanifin deal. And you add on to that a Tomas Hertl on reduced salary, as San Jose, for some reason, held on to a little bit of his money for the next forever. It makes the offseason make a lot more sense. It makes sense why we lost Stevenson, because Hertl is straight up an improvement. And it makes sense that we lost Alec Martinez to Chicago because, 1, why are they paying him that much money? And 2, Noah Hanifin is just a better, younger, faster, more skilled Martinez. The only difference being Martinez has 3 Stanley Cups and Hanifin's played in hardly any playoff games.
Well, I mean, also looking at the Knights roster and why you guys, had so many veterans and good players walk off is because, do you think that they're also trying to build in some younger guys into the team so that it's not just, let's say, old Chicago that has tons of veterans and is really good. And that's me admitting that as a Wild fan.
Yes,
which hurts.
Yes, because the 2021 Minnesota Wild with with Zach Parise and Ryan Suter were, the crop of youth.
Okay, I'm not talking about 2021. I'm talking about like 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
Especially, you got to admit that
the end of Koivu, the end of
Well, yeah, but I'm also talking about the Blackhawks specifically in a place where they were winning cup after cup and doing really well there for a while. But I think it's also because they had a lot of experienced players and they didn't get enough younger, fresh blood in there.
Yeah, no, the Knights organization has a fairly middle of the road farm system. Like the Henderson Silver Knights, they're pretty good. They've produced a couple of talented players. One of the younger players who's definitely going to get a good look this year is Pavel Dorofeev. He played pretty good. He was actually pretty much in the roster all of last season. He never really came back the same after he got elbowed in the head by Jacob Trouba just after the New Year.
Ooh.
And Trouba got suspended for that one.
That sounds like it would hurt.
Yeah, it was off a face-off too. Just Trouba and his flying elbow, which we all became accustomed to watching the playoffs. I got a nice view of that right from the beginning. And while the Knights won that game back in, I believe it was January, Dorofeev was out for several months after that. And so he's probably going to get a good look this year. One player that I'm really excited about coming out of the farm is Brendan Brisson. And if the Brisson name rings a bell, that's Sidney. That his dad is Sidney Crosby's agent, and Jack Eichel's agent. So there's a running gag about the Knights trading away their first round picks because there's only 2 of them currently in the organization, and Brisson is one of those. But I think so long as Jack Eichel's in Vegas, which is another 5 years at a minimum, I don't think Brendan's going anywhere because you don't want to make the dad mad.
But I mean, also going back to the first round pick thing that you just mentioned, it seems like it's working out for Vegas, or at least it did 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'll give it that. But it does make me a little concerned that there's not a lot coming in the farm. Like the top forward prospects are a little on the rough side. And so, there's some high-end talent there. And we're actually, I'm going to jump down a point. Even with this year's first round pick, everybody, there wasn't a lot of talent to get at number 19. There's only so many great players in any draft. And I think the Knights may have gotten lucky here. Their captain is currently the most successful 7th round pick in history because everybody forgets Mark Stone was taken 9 billionth in the draft.
Hey, some good guys get left on the table.
I mean,
for a while.
Sometimes you hit it. Sometimes you hit a home run, Marc-Andre Fleury at first overall, and sometimes you hit a bust like Alexis Lafreniere at first overall. I'm looking at you, New York. But Trevor Connolly was an interesting choice by Kelly McCrimmon, and I guess we should have taken this as a warning shot because he drafts Trevor Connolly despite the off-ice issues. And then he trades away Logan Thompson. Then he trades away Paul Cotter. Then he doesn't re-sign any of his UFAs. And then he does something I deem irredeemable. And this is coming as somebody who watches entirely too much hockey.
You do. You watch it entirely too much.
And I listen to Twitter a little too much. And I pay attention to the content creators, primarily, Steve Dangle and the SDPN podcast. So a bunch of Leafs fans. I got to ask, if Kelly McCrimmon, what are you doing signing Ilya Samsonov? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? I get it. Logan Thompson wanted out. He wanted to go be a number 1, and he was never going to be a number 1 behind Aiden Hill, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure he was the number 1 going down the stretch because he played the lion's share of the games, kicked off the playoffs, and went, I think, 2-2. To
be fair,
Stars.
too, wasn't Hill hurt for a decent amount of the season? Or at least a decent amount of the middle of the season?
Yeah, he was. And then I think...
Sometimes it's hard to get your groove back after you're hurt, though.
Yeah, some people say that it was a lack of confidence.
Okay.
But I think it was a little bit of lack of confidence in the injury that he sustained, I think back in January or early February. So I'm not going to hang the end of the year on him. And Hill played pretty well in his limited starts in the series against the Stars. But... you would think Thompson's on arguably the best contract in the NHL. Mm-hmm. He's making below league minimum, and he was an all-star. So on the one hand, I get it. Professionally, he wants to go be a number 1, and he has a chance to do that in Washington. But the system is pretty good. And so what does McCrimmon do? I mean, he trades for Akira Schmid, and I'm like, okay, there's our backup. That's going to be our backup for the year. He single-handedly beat the Rangers in a series in 2023. He's a great goalie. even though he had a bit of a down year last year. And then the press release comes out saying, oh, by the way, Schmid's going to be the number 3. He's going to be the starter in Henderson. And so then I started looking at the free agent goalies, and I don't like any of them. And then a lot of the trades come down. I'm like, oh, maybe UC Saros will be on the block. And then Nashville did their July 1st things. And I realized...
Nashville was busy July 1st.
And
busy.
And then I very quickly took Saros off the board when I realized that they, wanted to win the Stanley Cup next year. And then I just kind of forgot about the goalie problem. And then Ilya Samsonov comes around. And now I'm going to preface this by saying he was on the Toronto Maple Leafs last year, one of the worst defensive teams in the entire NHL. And he's going to Vegas, one of the best defensive teams in the NHL. So take this with a grain of salt. 2 years ago, Samsonov was a hot commodity. Great goalie. Last year, he had one of the worst save percentages of any goalie, had one of the worst goals save above expected of any goal. I think he gave up 15 more goals than was expected of him last year during the regular season.
Yikes.
And he was demoted to backup for the playoffs and wouldn't have even seen the ice if it weren't for Joseph Woll getting hurt in Game 6 after completely bungling the beginning of that series against the Bruins. So I'm going to leave it at this. I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be a tandem, like 1A, 1B, alternating starts, or if Hill's going to get 2-1. But what's really going to be the big thing is Hill and Samsonov are very similar in their game. They're big, they're very big, they're very, very, very big, and they're kind of slow.
That seems to be the move for Vegas, though, getting 6 foot, just huge guys.
The thing about that is the defense does such a good job structurally of keeping shots to the outside. And so long as Hill can stop letting pucks go in, under him, through him, or off his ear, I think it'll be okay. But I'm really going to be watching Samsonov curiously. I'm not entirely sure where we're going to do with that one. But it could be exciting. It could wind up being a very good signing. And thank goodness it's a slightly low event signing. Sure, he's making 2.5 times what Logan Thompson would if he was still around, and he won't perform as well. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, as he's a good enough goalie. Maybe getting him out of Toronto is a good idea. And honestly, I think that's all I have the stomach to talk about with Vegas right now. Because despite
you got real hurt.
Despite the drama that was going on in Nevada, with all the front office shenanigans and all the player movements, it does not even hold a candle to the soap opera that we saw up here in Minnesota when it comes to the PWHL.
No, it does not. So for those of you who don't know, PWHL had their first full season this year.
It was awesome.
It was. We went to a few games, went to a playoff game there. That was fun. So PWHL Minnesota ended up playing PWHL Boston in the final, for those of you who don't know. And it went to 5 games, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
With, I think, what is a very controversial goal that was called off in Game 4?
Game 4 overtime. It should have counted.
What was it, double?
Double, yeah.
Almost to triple overtime.
Minnesota should have won the Walter Cup here at home in St. Paul.
At XL Energy Center.
And instead it was forced to a winner-take-all Game 5 because apparently the refs didn't want to let the home team win on a double overtime in a 0-0 game,
To be fair, it was goalie interference in overtime, but...
I don't believe that.
And then right off the bat, Boston scored immediately after that to end the game.
True. But anyway, they won.
Yeah, they
and
did.
Usually that would be a time to celebrate.
Which it was for about a week. Yep. So, first week of June, we all in Minnesota are celebrating, having fun, excited that we won. Finally, we won something, right? Minnesota sports are not really known for being super successful sometimes. As I say, as a Minnesota sports fan my entire life, so please don't at me.
Wasn't the last one to win the Twins in 93?
Probably.
I mean, the Vikings haven't done anything.
I mean, the Timberwolves went real far this year, but then choked at
that's not winning.
Semis. Hey, I'm just saying we were somewhat successful.
That's true.
We went further than most teams. Anyways. Off track. So PWHL dismissed Minnesota's general manager, Natalie Darwitz, and it was 9 days after the final. It was a shock. Everyone was confused. At the time, there was a rumor of a clash with Coach Ken Klee. Definitely seems like there might have been a little bit of a power struggle At times, it seemed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't fire half your front office 9 days after winning a championship. Usually, that's
It
not what
wasn't the front
competent sports
office,
teams do,
but
is it?
there's more. There has been more, but I will get to that. So it's very much one of those things where apparently they had someone come in, like a third party come in and kind of take the temperature of PWHL Minnesota's front office and everything from what I've read. And it seemed like the environment wasn't great. And so they actually ended up letting Natalie go. Not entirely sure what the decision was. It seemed like it was internal and external from what I've read. And then during the PWHL draft in Minnesota a couple days later, they selected Britta Curl.
Dun, dun, dun.
Which apparently was a very controversial pick, probably still is. Apparently she liked anti-transgender, anti-LGBTQIA, and promoted COVID-19 conspiracies on Twitter. At this point, is anyone really surprised when stuff like this happens on Twitter? Or I'm sorry, it's X now.
I mean, my team, my favorite hockey team just drafted a guy who allegedly posted a swastika on a Snapchat story. So
I mean, yeah,
takes
exactly.
one to know
so
one.
but you know exactly what it's like
Yeah.
with Trevor Connolly, right?
Unfortunately,
So
he's still going to be a good hockey player.
But I mean,
maybe.
what does that mean for a league that is trying to be inclusive when it comes to PWHL? Like, what does that mean to
Therein
have
li-
a player?
Yeah, therein lies the problem. I mean,
So-
we've been to those games.
Yeah,
especially.
no.
I mean,
it's more diverse than a typical NHL game.
now we can't speak for the other 5 PWHL organizations, but I mean, obviously here in the Twin Cities, there's already that kind of, that kind of culture around. But it was like palpable at PWHL Minnesota games here at XL Energy.
No, it was very obvious that the people that granted the tickets are cheaper and it's a little bit more accessible hockey.
But that's also the point.
That is the point. That's the point of having only 6 PWHL teams. That's the point of starting small. That's the point of doing all the stuff for it to be sustainable and to grow hockey.
Right.
So then what does it say when someone who just won the Walter Cup and is picking, fairly early on to middle of the row,
Yeah.
when they select someone who's had these types of things? Granted, I said earlier that it is their job. So does this belong on as a talking piece, or does it belong kind of in the back where no one really looks?
Well, hasn't she come out and apologized for the
She did
comments?
apologize, but do you think it was an actual apology, or do you think it was an apology because she wants to play professional hockey?
Only time will tell.
That's true.
That's the same conversation you could have with Trevor Connolly.
Well, and I'm not here to speculate,
No,
right?
me
Because I
neither.
don't know these people personally. I don't know what their motives are. Maybe they were just having a bad day. Maybe they didn't realize what they were liking. I don't necessarily think that, but maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Right.
Like, some people out there just don't know or don't understand.
True.
So, but besides that,
So they draft her on June 11th was
I
the
think,
PWHL
yeah,
draft?
it was a few days after they dismissed Natalie.
And then there's a month of quiet. If only we knew what was going on behind the
well,
scenes.
a month of quiet isn't really that.
Da, 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 da.
So then we come to, I believe it was July 10th. And Ken Klee, the head coach, dismissed 3 staff members. I'm pretty sure most of them were coaching staff members.
Yep.
And it came out that there are allegations of Klee being toxic and unprofessional. Apparently, it's a common theme of things happening under Ken. And it makes me wonder, did Natalie leave out of her own, did she decide to leave because of all the issues that were going on?
Could be 6 of one, half dozen of another.
Right? Did she leave because she wanted to leave because she wasn't putting up with, frankly, bullshit? Or is
Put it in the swear jar.
That's fine. Hey, I swore finally.
Yeah, took you 24 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, did they think that the issue was under Natalie and not Ken? Do you think that the league understood what really was going on? Or did they just kind of take action and ask questions later?
My guess is it may have been a shoot first, ask questions later kind of thing.
That's kind of what I'm feeling, but I'm also not entirely sure because I don't think Natalie deserved what she got.
No.
So,
honestly, I think this is the PWHL's first real controversy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not even really a controversy in the sense that it's like league wide. It's a team's first controversy.
Well, and what does that say about if you have the Walter Cup champions, PWHL Minnesota? What
Whatever
does
they're
that
gonna be.
say? What?
Apparently, they're getting a name this year,
I
so
hope
we will.
so.
We will
because
not have to.
PWHL Minnesota
That
is
is
a mouthful.
It is. Yeah, it's a mouthful. I think it could also be a first shot over the bow for the hockey culture in itself. Like, it's well documented the NHL has a culture problem. Like, this isn't, I would love to take a deep dive into the Blackhawks thing, but that is not the time.
That's another podcast.
This is not the time nor
That's
the place
another
for that.
episode.
Yeah, that's for when we have more information. And I've done better research because right now the extent of my research is listening to the Steve Dangle podcast. Not a shameless plug or anything. I actually really like their stuff. They're really good, and they're part inspiration for why we're doing this. They have the same kind of format, but I do wonder how much this situation with PWHL Minnesota has to deal with setting a culture in the organization. Like, maybe they had to cut out the toxic part of the organization. Maybe the toxic part of the organization did the cutting out. But whatever the reason, there's now one somewhat cohesive voice in that organization setting somewhat cohesive of a culture.
Yeah, but also Klee apparently called players retarded. He made comments about other players' races on different teams. He nicknamed a person Dumbo in the locker room.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's my nickname in the locker room, but
not yet.
Give it time. It's either that or Bambi.
Yeah, but that will be endearing, not necessarily condescending like this one seems like it might be.
I mean, good coach. Good coach. Obviously.
Obviously he's a good coach because he took his team that far, but it also kind of speaks to the fact of how do you build a winning team and franchise? Like, does it have to be this, I don't want to say toxic, but this toxic and somewhat controversial.
Yeah. Good coach, not a good person.
But is there a difference?
Well,
that's a real question, right?
Let's turn the eyes back to the NHL because there's definitely a comparison.
Well, can I ask you this question before we do
Yes,
that? Do you think the Knights won with their locker room this tense?
No. If you guys watched Quest for the Cup during 2023 or watched the Stanley Cup movie, they are just the happiest bunch of guys, and that's actually one of the main reasons the Knights brought in Bruce Cassidy prior to the 22-23 season, because Pete DeBoer wasn't really set in the right locker room culture. And that's also why they brought in a lot of the older guys to teach the younger guys the right way to do it. So, you cannot stress the importance of locker room culture.
And probably unity and building each other up and just being there for each other. Yeah. Whether that's joking around or being supportive.
Agreed.
But you're going to say something else about NHL.
The way I kind of see it, like we were talking about, good coach, not good person. John Tortorella immediately jumps to mind. Former Blue Jackets coach, former host on ESPN Hockey, now I believe he's the current coach of the Flyers. He is notorious for being a spectacular coach, absolutely spectacular coach. Like, he's the one who was behind the bench when the Blue Jackets upset the then record-breaking Tampa Bay Lightning when they got swept in the first round after recording the most wins in the regular season until the Bruins did it 3 years later. But he's not exactly the greatest guy in the world. And then even more recently, a coach who never actually got to coach in his new job, Mike Babcock. He got brought into Columbus. He's got this reputation as being a pretty good coach. He coached in Toronto. And the first thing he does to try and get to know his players better, and I'm putting this in air quotes, is by asking to go through their camera rolls to try and get to know more about them. So you can see the issue there. Great coach, not a great person. And it goes without saying, he never coached a single game in Columbus. So,
I just wonder if that's tone deaf or is that just more...
Just a little bit.
Okay.
But it's hard to draw comparisons because the PWHL is such a different animal.
It is, because there's only 6 teams. It's relatively small. It's something I think that there's been other women's leagues in the past, let's be real.
Yeah, but this one's done the best.
I think it's just maybe positioning, or they're trying to get out there, or maybe their marketing strategy is better. Who knows?
Well, they're partnering with Bauer, so clearly they're doing something right.
Well, I mean, at some point, weren't they sponsored with CCM this year too?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're switching over. I think Bauer's doing the jerseys. I don't know if it extends to a equipment deal.
Who knows? We'll see this season, I guess.
Whenever it does start. They haven't
Yeah.
put a start date yet.
Well, obviously not. I think that they're trying to kind of figure out if they're doing a full season or if they're going to do a shorter season like they did this year.
I hope they do a full season.
I hope they at least like add in like a month or two.
I hope they do a better job marketing the game at Mariucci this time around and don't make the tickets unobtainable for college students, because that was a massive blunder on their part.
I'm sure we'll go over that fully in depth at some point.
Whenever the schedule comes out, yes, we will. Speaking of floundering Minnesota sports teams, let's talk about the Minnesota Wild, why don't we?
Oh, yay.
Because
My
right now they're currently the team in Minnesota that garners the least amount of hope for a championship. Twins are a pretty good baseball team.
Vikings.
The Vikings have J.J. McCarthy. The Vikings have hope. They have a quarterback from Michigan.
In a year or two, maybe.
It's hope. I've been a Vikings fan my entire life. Allow me to have some hope.
I mean, yeah, I think the Wild fans will have a lot more hope too when the $14 million cap comes off at the end of this year.
You know, that immediately jumped down to like 0.23 that I was going to talk about. But let's talk about it right now. Do you trust Bill Guerin?
Oh, we're not going there yet. No, but shout out to Ryan Suter, who's earning like millions of dollars from 3 different teams this year.
Yeah, shout out to Ryan Suter, who's being paid by 3/8 of the Central Division.
Yep.
And 2 of them not to play with, and 2 of those teams are paying him not to play for them.
He's with the Blues now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure
he's with Dean and Dean.
He is. He's being paid by the Wild and the Dallas Stars not to play for them. So
yeah, we're paying him like $7 million this year, aren't we?
Yeah, I think the total buyout penalties, if you throw Parise, Suter, and a couple of other miscellaneous players that nobody cares about, it totals like $14 million.
It's over $14 million. It's like 14.2 or something.
So basically, the Minnesota Wild for the better part of the buyouts happened in 21, happened right after COVID.
Yeah, so it's been 5 years
Going on. Yeah, it'll be about the 5th year of these buyouts, because this is the last year. But dude, imagine I would not love that job, being Bill Guerin right now, because like going into the last season when the salary cap was $83 million. Let's do some back of the napkin math because I'm not good at math. 83
minus what?
Minus 14 in the buyout penalties, that would be 69.
Correct.
So imagine you're walking into the office, the GM, and you have to pull a money ball. You know, you got to be Billy Bean in the early 2000s athletics. You know, there are rich teams and there are poor teams. And then there's 50 feet of crap. And then there's the Minnesota Wild.
Okay, we're not that bad.
No, I'm talking money-wise, because like
I mean, we still are paying our top players.
Yeah, but every other team gets to spend $83 million on their team. Mm-hmm. And then there's Toronto and Vegas, who actually spent $97 million on their team last year, but that's beside the point. And that's the maximum that they are supposed to be able to play. The Minnesota Wild had to spend a maximum of $69 million or something ridiculously low. Like, they were almost outspent by the Coyotes.
To be fair, I don't think we're doing that badly for the amount that we have capped ourselves.
No. You guys,
so to speak.
You guys were definitely in the title fight. You guys were in the playoff hunt.
No, I will say you got to give credit to our current coach.
Yeah,
you got to give credit to John Hines.
I will give the future coach of Team USA a little bit of credit where credit is due. But I can't really say anything yet, because
you can't, but there's also something to be said from going basically to dead last besides Chicago.
Yeah.
And being in the running for the playoff spot in February and March.
You fired your coach 2 weeks too late.
You tell me that every time we talk about this.
Because it's true.
I'm not saying it's not true.
We've gotten a little sidetracked off of what we were trying to get at. Let's start with the most recent bit of Minnesota Wild news. The most recent bit.
Okay.
They finally took the time and paid a defenseman not named Ryan Suter over $7 million, extending Brock Faber, which makes a lot of sense, 8 years, $8.5 million.
I think that's starting next season?
Yeah.
Okay.
Worth it. Yes, no, maybe.
We'll see.
What do you mean?
So, Faber is a great player. I'm not saying he's not. I think that he is only going to get better with time. I think that he is still fairly young. And I think that with Minnesota's veteran defensemen. We have Brodin
And Spurgeon.
Yep. And we have Middleton.
Yes, because Jake Middleton and John Merrill are the people I trust protecting my goalie.
I would rather have Middleton than Chisholm, but that's besides the point.
The amount of times you have called me in a fit of rage about Chisholm.
No, just about our defense in general. Because when Spurgeon is hurt and when Brodin is hurt,
Good point.
and those are your top two defensemen who have been with the team for a while. They've been with the team for a number of years.
Yeah.
They're the leadership core when it comes to defensemen. When you're missing those two players with Spurgeon out for so long, I'm talking, like 3/4 of the season with injuries.
Yeah, he was out for a while.
He was out, he is back, and then he was out again. But when you take away those two, it's hard because where's your leadership when it comes to defense?
True. And so it does beg the question, is he going to live up to this contract at all? Like, is Brock Faber capable of being one of the top 20 highest paid defensemen in the NHL? Like, for reference,
give him a year or two to develop. I think that right now this contract seems a little premature, but I don't think that he can't get there.
For reference, he makes a little less than two-time Stanley Cup champion Alex Pietrangelo, who is one of the highest paid defensemen in Vegas. He makes a little bit less than Noah Hannafin does. And he's one of the best defensemen in the NHL as well. He only makes a little bit less than Cale Makar.
But also, again, this is an 8-year contract.
True.
So we're going to see him develop.
There's a chance in year 6 of this contract it could look spectacular because the cap is supposed to grow up by like $5 million a year every year over the term.
I honestly think that because this contract doesn't start for another year.
Yeah.
So give him a year to develop, see where he is. But I think it could start paying off second year of his contract, honestly.
True. So on a grading scale of A to F, where do you put this contract? Because I personally put it like a C+.
I was going to say B- maybe.
I think it's a little rich, but it could pay off.
I think it's aggressive, but I don't think it's not well deserved. I think that this year he has shown that he is ready to rise to the occasion.
True.
And if you put him with the people that I just mentioned, Spurgeon, Brodin, Middleton, and also throw Bogosian in there.
Yep.
And I forget who else we have on defense right now, but
Chisholm.
Yeah.
Or do we not talk about Chisholm?
No. Please cut that out.
Forgive my co-host. She forgot how to breathe for a minute.
Please cut that out.
No, it's because she looked at the buyout penalties again. and the fact that the Wild did absolutely nothing.
Just cut it out. But what was your question?
So aside because we can move on from Brock Faber.
Okay.
I think we've covered all there is to cover on Brock Faber. And what I have to say is it positions the Wild when the buyout penalties go off the books to go out and actually be aggressive in free agency.
And
next
we
year.
Also already have then a defenseman under our belt.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that Bogosian sticks around.
We'll see. Every team does need that old school kind of like veteran presence. But at some point you have to put some trust in it.
I also said like 3 to 4 of our players on defense are all veterans. And going back to the Chisholm thing, I think that he just needs to figure out how to play defense with our goalies, I think is the major thing.
Yeah. The Wild didn't actually do a whole lot, and it's because they didn't have a whole lot of money to do anything with. But they also picked up Yakov Trenin.
Yeah, and I looked at him and I said, who?
Yeah, I really know hockey, and even I didn't really know Yakov Trenin.
So he's formerly at the Preds.
Yep.
He played, I believe, in the farm team for them.
Yep.
And if he didn't for them, he did with someone else. And then it looks like the Preds traded him to the Avalanche sometime this season, probably around the trade deadline would be my guess.
Would make sense.
And he had about 16 games plus some change with the playoffs with the Avs. So, and in that time, this past year, he had 12 goals in the regular season and 1 during the playoffs. So do you think he will perform?
Probably not. because
Wow,
everything
okay.
that comes to Minnesota goes wrong. No, in all seriousness, he could be good. I'm not sure what role he fits. He's probably a third line guy.
Honestly, I could see him adding some depth because not for nothing, Minnesota sometimes does have a good track record of bringing in players that are sometimes underutilized and putting them in a better position. Like look at Stahl.
Hey, you could have bought Chandler Stevenson for 6 point something million.
I'm pretty sure we only had about 3, babe.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
We only had about 3. So not much you can do with that. But I do think that he could add some depth to our line, and I hope so.
There's not a lot to talk about with Trennan. He's a depth piece. He's an investment. You know, the 4-year contract is a little rough.
I'm hopeful.
But
I'm hopeful.
He's got a lot of talent. Maybe he just needed a change of scenery.
I'm pretty sure he's also from like Hopkins, Minnesota.
You should look that up.
No, I'm pretty sure because I was looking at his stats last night.
Oh boy.
What?
He's going to be putting up numbers next year.
No, why? I think that also Bill Guerin tends to go for like the Minnesota boys. Not for nothing. There's a lot of people in Minnesota that play hockey.
Yeah,
but,
me.
But there's
Bill, my phone is ready. Call me.
But I
Need a
think
goalie.
oh, we do not need goalies. We do not need goalies.
Anyway, he's got potential.
I do think so. I really do. But as I was saying with Bill, he tends to go for the Minnesota boys. Like I believe Faber's from University of Minnesota.
Yep.
There's a number of other people that are from Minnesota on our team. And I'm wondering if it's just the fact that he likes to try to go for Minnesota people to be on the Minnesota Wild, or if it just happens to be a coincidence.
True.
But I don't think it's that much of a coincidence sometimes.
Yeah. So, you see what's next on the list.
Yes, I do.
You hate this conversation.
I'm liking it more and more the more we have it.
All right. We're going to have this conversation now.
I know we will.
Marc-Andre Fleury. Mm-hmm. I know him. You
Yes.
know him.
Yep.
I love him.
He's been on both of our teams.
You don't.
I don't not love him.
One more year.
Yeah.
You thought last year was the last year?
I
thought
had
you
a
were gonna
gut
be rid of
feeling.
him.
I had a gut feeling that he was going to sign again.
Well, he did.
Yes, he did.
And
2.5 mil.
yeah.
1-year extension.
What do you think?
You're just waiting for me to say something controversial here, aren't you?
Aaron. Listen.
Mm-hmm.
We met at law school orientation.
Yes.
And what was the first conversation we had?
Hockey.
Primarily.
Hockey.
And what was the topic of that conversation?
The Minnesota Wild and the Golden Knights.
And the state of Marc-Andre Fleury and his inability to give up cohesive rebounds.
Please note that our defense is not built for Marc-Andre Fleury at all.
No, it is not.
And that is one of the main things I have. So if you isolate the fact that we do not have a good defense, Marc-Andre Fleury is not a terrible goalie.
No.
He's a decent goalie. He's at the end of his career now.
He only won the Vezina 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm fully aware.
So
I'm not saying that he's a bad goalie. I'm just saying that the way that he plays, he tends to give up rebounds.
yeah, and if you guys,
Yes.
if the defensemen, box out better, that's not a problem. But
Well,
as we've
if they
seen,
clear the crap in front of the net,
that's true.
they also don't have to.
That is true.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, he's a good goalie. Here's my prediction about Fleury. He's not going to finish the year in Minnesota. Not a chance.
Really.
Not a chance.
I think if we make a run at the playoffs, he might.
Not a chance.
Really.
Here's what I have to say. He's going to finish the year in one of 3 places.
Okay.
Edmonton,
Okay.
which would kill me.
Of course it
Toronto.
would, because you hate Edmonton.
With a passion.
I know you do.
It'll be Edmonton, it'll be Toronto,
Oh, God, not Toronto.
or it'll be Pittsburgh. He'll go back, play the end of his year with the team that he
So
started
he'll
with.
do
and
what
retire.
Stahl did this year
Yeah.
and sign a 1-day contract with with Carolina.
He'll do something like that. Or if the Wild are in a playoff spot, he may want to give it one more shot. But
I think you're wrong. I think he's going to end the year in Minnesota.
if he does, that'd be cool. I don't know.
I think Minnesota's been really good to him.
I can
since
tell
he's
you
been
one
here.
place he's not going to end the year with.
Vegas.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
And why not?
Because his agent's a psycho.
Elaborate.
Allow me to cast your mind back to the year 2020. Mm-hmm. We're in the bubble. The Golden Knights at that trade deadline acquired Robin Lehner, who is a name we don't talk about in the Knights fan base anymore. And they just picked him up at the deadline, and they were going to run a 1A, 1B tandem for that playoffs in the bubble.
Yep.
And apparently there was a conversation between Pete DeBoer, the then coach, and Fleury saying that he was going to be the number one. He was going to primarily take them through the playoffs, and everything was going to be fine. Mm-hmm. We get into the bubble, and their alternating games get going pretty good. And then sometime around the beginning of the first actual round, because remember, this was the year with the play-in, and I think we beat the...
It was because of COVID, right?
Yeah, it was because COVID. So there was the play-in round, so 12 teams on each side made it instead of the 8 that usually do.
Because it was a shortened season.
Shortened, and they couldn't figure out how to set the playoff races, and so they just put one
and make it fair. And
so they just put 1 through 12. So the Blackhawks wound up beating the Oilers in the first play-in round and played the Knights in the first round, I think, or something like that.
Okay, anyways.
Anywho, we're a little too deep in the story.
Going back.
But anyway, it's the context is there was a lot of time off, and nobody was entirely sure which goalie for the Knights was going to be the number one, and who was going to get the lion's share of the starts. And so we get into the playoffs, and it looks like, and everybody agrees it's going to be Fleury. And then Fleury doesn't play 2 games in a row. And Fleury's agent, Alan Walsh, tweets out a video of Fleury with a sword through his back, and the sword says DeBoer on it. And so beginneth the schism between Fleury and the front office. So the Knights get eliminated in the conference final to the Stars.
Because he gave up a goal, right?
No. That happened the next year.
Oh, got it.
And then he comes back the next year, full season, shortened season in the West Division. Fleury wins the Vezina. Fleury and Lehner win the Jennings. They're the best goalies in the league by a mile. Get the number 2 overall seed in the West. Get all the way to the semifinal, because it wasn't the Western Conference final because they played the Canadiens. Fleury screws up a play behind the net in game 3. The Knights lose that game, ultimately losing the series in 6. And the moment known as the Gaff was ultimately the last thing Fleury ever did in a Knights uniform, as he found out he was traded via Twitter. And
that's so sad.
Alan Walsh has a lot of clients in the NHL. None of them play for Vegas. None of them. He's got like 30 of them.
Wow.
None of them are in Vegas.
So he can roster like basically a full team.
If you took Alan Walsh's client list and made it a team, they'd never lose.
I believe that.
I mean, they've got good goaltending. I'll give them that. They've got good goaltending. But yeah, no, Fleury is never going to come back. To circle back to where we were, he's either going to finish. I guess he could finish the year in Minnesota.
I hope he does, because our fan base has grown to love that man so much.
Can't say I blame you. But if it's not Minnesota, it'll be Edmonton, Toronto, or Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And then
remind me what practice jersey you have for the Golden Knights?
I have a Fleury one.
Uh-huh.
Wasn't for lack of trying.
I know, but you have a soft spot for Fleury.
I do. I always have.
Yeah.
It's not the biggest soft spot I have for an NHL goalie, but it's up there.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that he's just generally like a decent guy.
Oh, yeah. No, he's an awesome dude.
Yeah.
I've never met him personally, but I would love the opportunity
It just seems like anything that is put out about him, personal, private, public, anything, is always super.
I have never been happier for something that didn't happen to the Knights, or something that happened to another team. I was never happier than when he said, "Screw you, NHL," and wore his custom Native American Pride Night mask this year, in spite of the multi-$1,000 fine he was going to get from the NHL after being told, "Fleury, don't do it."
As much as sometimes like his rebounds make me frustrated, it's also not always on him.
Nope.
And I mean, there was that one game where he just got hung out to dry.
That was in March. Get over it. Get over it.
I'm still mad.
Oh, you want to get really mad? You really want to get mad?
Please do not.
You want to get really mad?
Please do not.
John Hines.
Yeah.
He's sticking around.
That doesn't make me mad.
Yeah, but he's buddy with Billy G.
Yeah, but that's not his fault.
No, good point. So, do you think that's the right choice for the Wild, having him stick around as head coach, despite his propensity to pull the goalie in overtime?
Yeah,
as we
were
saw.
at that game.
Yes, we were.
That arena don't let the broadcast fool you. It was drop a pin quiet.
You could have heard me if I talked like this.
No, I could have heard you across the damn arena.
Well, there was that one or two screaming. There was those like few screaming Knights fans down in the lower bowl, but I have seen a lot.
It was quiet because no one could comprehend what we just saw.
I've seen a lot of strange things at a hockey arena.
You mean
That
like the
one
10-7 Canucks Wild game?
That one was awesome.
That one was great.
I have not, since coming to Minnesota, I am yet to see a truly normal Minnesota Wild game.
Yeah.
Like, sure, there was, and sure, of the games last year, it was the overtime empty netter against the Knights. It was the 10-7 game against the Canucks. And it was the last time that they ever played the Arizona Coyotes, which we didn't know it at the time was not a normal game either.
No, it wasn't.
But that's a whole nother story to unpack in another podcast as well. We're just trying to set the dialogue and cover all the ground on our respective teams before we venture out into the joys of the Utah Hockey Club.
We'll maybe cover that
next time.
Yeah, next episode or the one after that, because they've got some interesting things going on over there.
There's a lot to cover there, so we'll cover that on the next one.
Yeah, but I think going back to John Hines, I think that he brought us from second in the league, basically dead last.
Yep.
Like second from last, all the way to being a playoff contender. Granted, that is not an easy position when you come in. What was it, November?
Later.
So yeah, but he came in before December. He came in after September.
They still fired him too late.
They still fired him way too late.
Yep.
But
doesn't he come back like opening night?
I'm pretty sure that we play the Blues like one of our opening stretches. Yeah.
That'll be fun.
It should be interesting.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun.
Apparently, Dean has had some words about that, but we'll get into that later.
He's not burning the bridge as much as Marcia is burning the bridge to Vegas.
Anyways.
Anywho.
Walking away from that burning mess.
Lol.
Yeah, no, I don't know how I feel about him necessarily because he hasn't had a full season. I feel like when we actually see John Hines in action for a full season, I'll have, or at least maybe kick off the season, maybe a month into it, I'll have a better idea on how I feel about it.
True.
So
we spent a lot of time today talking about the Knights' first round pick and Trevor Connolly.
I mean, we didn't spend that much time.
Well, we spent more time than I've ever spent talking about a first round pick ever right after they've been drafted.
That's fair.
But let's talk about a guy who, when he last played in XL Energy Center, he was winning the national championship for Denver in defenseman Zeev Bouillon. What are your thoughts on Zeev Bouillon?
I think Zeev is probably one of the answers to our veteran defensemen.
Does he crack the league this year, or does he spend this year in Iowa and then is pushing for a roster spot out of next year's camp?
I mean, in development camp, in dev camp, he was looking like he was having fun. Maybe not taking it
too seriously,
super seriously, but at least serious enough.
Yeah, that would make sense.
We also saw him for like half an hour.
Yeah,
yeah,
they were doing some weird defensive drills. He's got a decent shot. Doesn't have a lot of pop to it, but I never saw him actually wind up for a slap shot.
No, we saw very few things, and we are more focused on the goalies, honestly.
Granted, the art of the slap shot is dying in the NHL, and it's very sad.
I hate it because
I miss the early 2000s.
The amount of times I yell at the TV, just shoot it from the point. Your point is open is ridiculous.
Shoot the puck.
That's you, not me.
That's true. So good, but give it time. Is that kind of thing.
Again, he was just drafted. He was at dev camp, so that means that he's one of the younger players. Like,
yep.
He's really green. Yeah, we'll see what he does.
That is fair.
I don't really have much else to talk about with our draft picks, honestly. I just know that we made out like bandits. Yeah, we have 5 of them.
Hey, your 5th round pick or whatever told your GM that
Who, Chase?
Yes.
Okay.
It's one of those guys who was drafted in the later rounds.
Yeah.
Came up to Bill Guerin and was like, "You just drafted the steal of the draft. You're never going to regret this pick." And like,
I hope he's right.
That's a lot of arrogance for.
But if you're that confident going into the NHL, like, what does that say about you as a player?
I've never been that confident about anything in my life, so I wouldn't know.
Give it time.
That's fair. So let's kind of wind down with a conversation about what bold predictions you have, because we're inside a month away from the beginning of training camp, and as we get closer to camp, we're going to talk about this a lot more.
We
But
definitely will.
May as well preview some of our bold predictions / wants / needs for the upcoming 24-25 season. I'll lead us off with a bold prediction. Absolutely bold prediction. Mm-hmm. Ilya Samsonov is not going to be hot garbage. He's actually going to be a front runner for the Vezina.
Interesting. That's a real...
I think he's going to take the starting...
That's a real bold prediction of you.
Unfortunately, I have a feeling Aiden Hill is going to have an injury early on in the year. I don't want it to happen. Or at least at some point
in the year.
I really don't want to speak it into existence because I love the guy.
Well,
yeah.
Knocking on wood for you.
Yeah, for context, that's knocking on wood. But I don't know. I think getting him out of Toronto, as much as I dislike him and his numbers from last year, he could have won the Vezina 2 years ago in Toronto, which never happens. And so I wonder what's going to happen when you get him working with the Knights goalie coach, who is renowned in the business as one of the best. Like, everybody forgets, Aiden Hill was a nobody. We got him for a 4th-round pick out of San Jose, and he wound up winning the Stanley Cup that year. Logan Thompson was a Canadian college player. The odds of Canadian college player making it to the NHL are less than 1%. And he's an all-star.
Well, Logan Thompson is...
He's not
top tier.
He's not normal. He's a great athlete.
He's top tier, honestly.
But you have to wonder how much of that is down to natural talent and how much of that is down to coaching. And so we're going to find out.
It can be both.
We're going to find out with Samsonov if it's both.
But I mean, at least Samsonov is like, at least he has the foundation, right?
Yep.
And I mean, if Toronto has as bad as defense as you say they do,
it's horrible. It's let's do this.
That's my point, is that if his defense lays him out to dry, and if his offense can't put up the numbers, it doesn't matter how many goals he lets in.
Can you name anybody on the Leafs blue line at all?
I'm not a Leafs fan.
Neither am I.
I'm not a Leafs fan, bro.
Yeah, but you can name defensemen on other teams, like you know who Cale Makar is.
I don't know who he is.
Hold on.
Yeah.
What
team does he play for?
Colorado.
Yeah, I don't really. You
You're on the
forget,
Conn Smythe.
bro. You forget that I do not follow hockey as closely as you do. I also do not dive into hockey Twitter as much as you do. I do not watch as many games as you do.
That's fair.
I'm more than a casual fan, but I'm not much more past that.
That's fair. I got one more bold prediction.
Okay.
One more bold prediction. It's not as bold as saying Samsonov's going to be a Vezina finalist.
Okay.
Despite Brendan Brisson playing less than 20 games in his career, I think he's going to play more than 50 this year. And it wouldn't shock me if he put up 20 goals or more. He's going to make the team out of camp. He's going to play on opening night, and he's going to run with it for the whole year. Maybe he'll even be a Calder finalist.
We'll see.
I highly doubt it, but I want it to be true.
Yeah. Speaking of that, how do you feel about Connor Bedard getting that? That's one thing we didn't talk about.
I'm going to say this. Mm-hmm. The second Connor Bedard was drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks, they wrote his name on the trophy. He could have missed the entire season, and he still would have won.
Do you think Brock Faber got cheated?
No.
No?
No, the narrative was always that Bedard was going to be the Calder.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about it, and honestly, I think that basically hanging your hat on the fact that you're like number one rookie or whatever.
You want to know something really crazy about the way that the numbers worked out? Bedard actually technically didn't have the highest points. He didn't have the highest goals per 60 of the rookie class.
Really?
No. That honor goes to Dorofeev of the Knights. He scored more goals per game on average than Bedard did. But he's not Connor Bedard. Mm-hmm. Just like next year, I'm pretty sure they've already written Macklin Celebrini's name on the Calder for next year.
So then why does it even matter who wins this?
The message.
Okay, who cares?
The writers. It gives the NHL a narrative. It gives me a reason to turn on Sharks games this year. And it gave me a reason to turn on Blackhawks games last year.
So basically, it's just to drive the numbers up and not much else. That's what you're saying.
It starts as that, and then when you get to like game 60, it actually starts to like be, okay, who's actually the best rookie? But like, you can't call, I have an issue with calling somebody a Calder favorite before they've ever even played a game. Because like, that's with, Bedard on opening night. Here's your odds-on favorite to win the Calder Trophy. He's played exactly 0 seconds in the NHL,
Yeah,
but
how do you even know if
going to
he's
win
good?
the Calder.
But how do you even know he's good and can play at the level if he's never played at that level before?
This is a rant that I need to go on in full length when we aren't trying to wind down. All I have to say is after he scored his first goal, they put a counter at them comparing him to how many goals he is short of Gretzky, and I lost it. I absolutely lost it. So
Okay.
I'll put that one in a box. And
Okay.
I'll come back to it later.
Okay.
But anyway,
My bold prediction time.
what you got?
I am just going to do one since we want to keep this a little bit
Yep.
nice to listen to and not super, super long.
We just passed an hour.
No, I know. Where is it? I think Chisholm will get better at defense.
No.
Why not?
Did you watch him last year?
He does not have the defensive IQ. I will admit that.
He has the defensive IQ of a peanut.
I think he should belong as a forward and not a defenseman, honestly. but I hope the fact that Spurgeon is coming back this year, the fact that Bogosian's coming back, Middleton's coming back, Brodeen's coming back,
It might
Faber's
work.
coming back. I'm hoping that the 4 or 5 of them can kind of get Chisholm on the same page as they are. Because
Yep.
right now based on what I remember watching, he needs to have a little bit higher defense IQ.
That's true.
That's all I got to say about it. I think he's a decent player, but he just needs to kind of hone in a little bit.
Yep. So I guess we can actually wrap it up since we've run out of hockey things to talk about.
Yes.
So we're recording this now. We're going to try and get at least 2 of these a week.
Yes.
And
Our goal is to try to have them out on Tuesdays and Saturdays.
we say as we're recording this on a Wednesday,
That's fine.
but we'll get it. Hopefully, as we get closer to the year, there will be actually, real news and notes to talk about. And
I'm excited to get into like training camp
Yeah.
and preseason and see these guys on the ice again.
yeah, next time up, we're going to talk about the other things that happened around the league over the summer, mainly being the plight that is the former Arizona Coyotes, the new
R.I.P.
Utah Hockey Club, and their whatever jerseys.
Yeti, hopefully.
I think it's going to be the Yetis.
I hope so.
I mean, there are a lot of names that I had kicking around that I will save until next time because not all of them are the smartest. So I will save it for the next full length. So we both appreciate you lending us your ears for this last hour, assuming you made it all the way through. If you jumped around, I can't really say I blame you. I'd jump around too.
Yep. Don't forget to subscribe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't forget to subscribe. And we will try and be regular and on our uploads.
And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.